died slowly. Supreme Commander Kyle Theron Dravis watched from the command throne of the Obsidian Dominion as the enemy vessel vented atmosphere in crystalline streams, beautiful in its way, like watching a wounded animal take its final breaths under twin suns. Around him, the bridge hummed with controlled precision. Officers at their stations, screens painting the darkness in shades of amber and crimson, the smell of recycled air and the faint ozone tang of overworked power systems. 40 years of moments like this. Sir, the Peltian commander is requesting terms of surrender. The communications officer's voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who'd done this before. They all had. Dravik studied the dying ship on the tactical display. The Peltian Confederation had sent their finest, a bioship bred for war grown in orbital spawning pools, its hull alive with reactive armor that could heal from most conventional weapons. Most. Put him through. The holographic display flickered. A Peltian appeared, its chitinous faceplates, cracked mandibles clicking in what might have been pain or resignation. Green ichor leaked from a wound above its primary eye cluster. Commander Dravix, even through the translator, the alien's voice carried weight. Respect. You have won, my crew, my children. I ask for mercy. Dravix leaned forward slightly, 62 years old. Silver streaking through dark hair kept military short. Lines around gray eyes that had seen too many battles, made too many decisions like this one. You engaged us in open space, Dravix said quietly. You followed the rules of honorable warfare. Your crew fought bravely. He gestured to his second-in-command. Colonel Cortland dispatched medical shuttles. Retrieve Peltian survivors. Full medical care, prisoner protocols, and eventual repatriation. The Peltian commander's mandibles stilled. You honor the old ways. Always. Dravik's voice carried the certainty of 4 decades in uniform. War has rules. Even in the darkness between stars, there are things civilized beings do not do. You fought with honor. You will be treated with honor. The Peltian bowed its head. Your name will be remembered, Commander, as a warrior, as a being of principle. The transmission ended. Colonel Reese Cortland approached the command throne. 45 years old, career military, the kind of officer who'd follow Dravix through a supernova if ordered. Medical shuttles dispatched, sir. Estimated recovery time 4 hours. Good. Dravix stood his full height, impressive even among the tall Caladrian species. Send the full battle report to High Command. And Reese? Sir. Make sure the report mentions the Peltian commander's courage. He deserves that much. Cortland nodded, understanding in his eyes. This was how Kale Theron Dravix fought wars. With overwhelming force when necessary, with mercy when possible, with honor always. The galaxy respected him for it. 6 months later, he would learn that respect was not the same as understanding. The gas giant Threshold Prime dominated the viewport like a jewel floating in eternal night. Dravix stood at the observation deck of the Obsidian Dominion, hands clasped behind his back, and studied the planet's rings. Mineral wealth beyond calculation. Ice and rock and rare elements that could power a dozen colony worlds for a generation. Worth fighting for. Behind him, the bridge thrummed with the quiet efficiency of 317 warships maintaining perfect formation. The Third Armada, the largest battle group the Caladrian Imperium had assembled in a generation, and all of it under his command. Sir, the final habitat has been cleared. Commander Alara Vex approached her scales, the burnished copper of veteran warriors. 40 years old, battle coordinator, a woman who'd earned every scar on her service record. Human colonists have been relocated to the transport ships without incident. Casualties? None, sir. They were surprisingly compliant. Dravix turned from the viewport. Compliant how? Vex consulted her datapad. No protests, no violence. They just packed their belongings and left, almost like they'd been expecting it. Something about that bothered Dravix, though he couldn't say why. In his experience, resistance was normal. Anger, defiance, even futile attacks from desperate colonists protecting their homes. But calm compliance. What do we know about human psychology, he asked. Limited data, sir. Vex pulled up holographic displays. They've been part of the galactic community for 12 years. Minimal interaction. They maintain small colonies, accept territorial boundaries. We establish, participate in diplomatic councils, but rarely speak. Intelligence classifies them as cautious, possibly timid, and total naval strength. Best estimates, 200 vessels scattered across their territory. Mix of cruiser and destroyer class. Nothing that should concern the Third Armada. Dravix studied the data. 200 ships for an entire species. The Caladrian Imperium alone fielded over 800. and humanity had made no attempt to build alliances, establish defensive pacts, or demonstrate military capability beyond basic system patrols. Peaceful, withdrawn, non-threatening. So why did he feel uneasy, Sir? Incoming transmission from the diplomatic shuttle. The communications officer looked up from his station. Human ambassador requesting permission to dock. Cortland stepped forward. Sir, should we deny it? We've already claimed the system. There's nothing to negotiate. Dravix considered, then shook his head. No, let them speak their piece. The old ways demand we hear them out. The old ways, Vex said quietly, assume both sides follow the same rules. Then let's see if humanity understands rules. 20 minutes later, Dravix stood in the Obsidian Dominion's receiving bay, watching a small human shuttle settle onto the deck with the precision of experienced pilots. The bay doors sealed, atmosphere equalized, pressure normalized. The shuttle's hatch opened. A human woman emerged. Dravix's first thought, fragile. By Caladrian standards, all humans looked fragile. Small-boned, lacking natural armor, their soft skin vulnerable to environment and weapon alike. This one stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, dark hair pulled back in a severe style, wearing what appeared to be a diplomatic uniform of charcoal gray with minimal insignia. Mid-30s, he estimated. Old enough to carry authority, but young enough to suggest ambition. She walked with confidence, though. Each step measured precise. Her dark eyes swept the receiving bay, cataloging details before settling on Dravix. Supreme Commander Kael Theron Dravix. Her voice carried across the bay, amplified slightly by a small device at her collar. Not timid, not uncertain. I am Ambassador Ariavel of the Terran Coalition. I'm here to deliver a formal protest regarding your occupation of the Threshold system. Dravix gestured for his guards to stand down. Ambassador Vale, you've come a long way to deliver what we both know will be ignored. Perhaps. She walked closer, stopping at the regulation diplomatic distance. 20 feet. Close enough for conversation. Far enough for security. But protocol demands the attempt. Something in her phrasing caught his attention. Not, I hope you'll listen. Not, please reconsider. Just, protocol demands. Like she was going through motions she knew were futile. The threshold system, Dravix said, lies outside your established territorial claims. The colonial treaties are being violated by your presence here. Arya's interruption was smooth professional. We filed proper claims 3 years ago. Your Imperium's bureaucracy has been delaying the approval process. Bureaucracy takes time. Convenient time. Just long enough for you to establish military presence and claim salvage rights. Dravix studied her, sharp, and completely unafraid despite standing in the middle of a warship surrounded by soldiers who could kill her without effort. Either brave or foolish, or she knew something he didn't. Ambassador Vale, Dravix said carefully, I respect your courage in coming here, but courage doesn't change mathematics. I have 317 warships in this system. You have what? A diplomatic shuttle and strongly worded protest. We have patience, Commander. Arya pulled a small data chip from her uniform, and we have proper legal standing. This contains our formal demand withdraw from the threshold system within 72 hours. Or what? Or we will be forced to dispatch one fleet to secure the system. The words hung in the recycled air of the receiving bay. Then Dravix laughed. Not cruel laughter, not mocking, just genuine amusement at the absurdity. One fleet against the Third Armada, against 317 ships, each one a masterwork of Caladrian engineering bristling with weapons that had conquered a dozen species over the past century. One fleet, Dravix repeated, his laughter fading to a smile that held no malice. Ambassador, I appreciate your position. You have to make the protest, I understand, but surely you realize how that sounds. Arya's expression didn't change. I realize exactly how it sounds, Commander, and yet you're saying it anyway. Because it's true. She held out the data chip. 72 hours. This is not a negotiation. It's a courtesy, a final warning. Dravix took the chip, though he had no intention of reading its contents. Your dedication to protocol is admirable, but when your government realizes the situation here, they'll understand. This system is claimed. The colonists are unharmed. We've followed all conventions regarding Commander Dravix. Arya's voice cut through his words like a blade through silk. May I ask you a personal question? The shift in tone surprised him. If you wish. In your career, how many species have you conquered? The Imperium doesn't conquer. We incorporate. How many? Dravix met her gaze. 7 major species, dozens of minor ones. And how many times did they warn you first? Most fought immediately, some negotiated, a few surrendered, but none of them warned you. Arya's dark eyes held his. None of them gave you 72 hours to reconsider. None of them told you exactly what would happen if you refused. What are you saying? I'm saying, Commander, that you should listen to the warning. Not because we're asking, because we're telling you what will happen. As a courtesy, as a final act of mercy, perhaps. The word mercy spoken in her calm, certain voice sent an unexpected chill down Dravix's spine. 72 hours, Arya repeated. After that, we will enforce our territorial claim. I genuinely hope you choose to withdraw. She turned, walking back toward her shuttle with that same measured pace. Dravix found his voice. Ambassador, wait. She paused but didn't turn. When your fleet arrives, Dravix said quietly, and it will be destroyed in minutes by overwhelming force. What will you have gained? Now she turned, and for the first time he saw something in her expression. Not fear, not anger, sadness. Commander, she said softly, I hope you never have to learn the answer to that question, but I suspect you will. The shuttle launched 5 minutes later. Dravix stood in the receiving bay, turning the data chip over in his hands, and tried to shake the feeling that he'd just missed something important, something crucial. Sir Cortland approached. Should we file the protest with command? File it. Standard bureaucratic response. Acknowledge receipt, note our legal standing, express regret for any misunderstanding. End the thread about their fleet. Dravix looked at the bay doors where the shuttle had departed. Intelligence says they have approximately 200 ships total. Even if they sent everything, we outnumber them. And they won't send everything. No species gambles their entire military on one system. Standard fleet composition. 15 to 30 vessels. Probably destroyers, maybe a cruiser or two. Dravix pocketed the data chip. We'll continue fortification. If they come, we'll give them the same courtesy we gave the Pelthians. Honorable combat, professional conduct. And if they surrender, we'll treat them well. And if they don't surrender, Dravix thought of the young ambassador's certainty, her strange sadness. Then we'll win quickly, he said, and minimize casualties on both sides. What he didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that for the first time in decades, he felt the cold touch of doubt. The first day passed in routine efficiency. Dravix reviewed fortification plans, approved patrol rotations, and studied intelligence reports on human naval capacity. Long-range sensors swept the surrounding sectors. No unusual movement, no fleet mobilization, nothing but the standard traffic of merchant vessels and civilian transports going about their peaceful business. Sir, analysis of human ship movements over the past 6 months shows no deviation from normal patterns. The intelligence officer projected holographic data. No recall of deep space vessels, no emergency construction at their known shipyards. Either they're bluffing, or they already have ships in position, Cortland finished, where Vex gestured at the tactical display. We have full sensor coverage 3 light years out, every approach vector monitored. If they had a fleet anywhere near here, we'd see it. Dravix studied the 3-dimensional map of surrounding space. She was right. The Third Armada's sensor net was perfect. Overlapping coverage, multiple redundancies, constant scanning. A mouse couldn't enter this system without them knowing. So why did he keep checking the sensors? Maintain alert status, he ordered. Standard protocols. I want to know the moment anything enters sensor range. Sir, that's still 58 hours away. You think they'll actually come? Oh, I think, Dravix said slowly, that Ambassador Vale believed what she was saying. And belief like that usually has a reason. That night in his private quarters, Dravix opened a secure channel to his wife. The holographic image, stabilized, showing a woman his own age, silver in her dark hair, wearing the comfortable clothes of someone enjoying retirement on Caldera Prime. Her scales had faded to the soft pewter of age, but her eyes remained sharp. KL, warm affection in her voice. I didn't expect to hear from you during an operation. I needed to hear your voice. She studied his face through the hologram. What's wrong? Nothing, everything, I don't know. He gestured at the data screen surrounding his quarters. We're in perfect position. 317 ships. Clear numerical superiority. Every tactical advantage. And yet you're worried. There was an ambassador, young human woman. She delivered an ultimatum with absolute certainty, like she knew something I didn't. His wife smiled gently. Kyle, you've faced species with superior technology, better tactics, biological advantages. You've always won because you understood the situation better than they did. That's what bothers me. This time I think she understood better. Then trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, withdrawing now would look like cowardice. The Imperium is watching. High Command expects this system secured. If I retreat from a bluff, is it worth your life to find out if it's a bluff? Dravix looked at the hologram of his wife. 58 years together, through wars and peace, victories and losses, promotions and politics. She'd been his anchor through it all. I've spent decades building a reputation, he said quietly. Honor, courage, strength. If I run from a threat I can't even see, you'll still be alive to rebuild it. I'll be the commander who fled from shadows. She sighed. Then I suppose you'll do what you've always done. Stand your ground. Fight with honor. Win with mercy. A pause. Just come home when it's done. Always. The hologram faded. Dravix sat alone in his quarters and wondered why it had felt like goodbye. The second day brought activity. Sir, we've detected encrypted transmissions emanating from human space. The signals officer looked troubled. High-band military-grade encryption. We can't break it. Can't or haven't yet. Can't, sir. The encryption it's not like anything in our database. The mathematical principles appear completely foreign. Dravix leaned forward in his command throne. Origin point. Multiple locations across human territory, all transmitting to a single receiver somewhere in deep space. We can't localize it precisely. The signal dispersal pattern is too sophisticated. They're coordinating something, Vex said. But what we'd see fleet movement, we'd detect ships massing. Unless they're already in position, Cortland suggested. Deep space engines cold waiting. That's paranoid thinking, Reese. Is it, sir? We know almost nothing about human capabilities. They've been in the galactic community 12 years and haven't fought a single engagement. No demonstrations of military power. No conflicts? Nothing. Because they're peaceful. Or because they're hiding something. Dravix considered that. 12 years of peaceful behavior. Accepting boundaries, following protocols, participating in diplomatic councils with quiet voices. Never pushing, never challenging, never showing teeth. Either genuinely peaceful or patient. Increase sensor coverage, he ordered. I want full spectrum analysis. If there's anything out there, I want to know about it. They found nothing. The third day felt different. Dravix couldn't explain it. No tactical change, no new intelligence. But the bridge crew seemed tense. Officers double-checking systems, unnecessary status reports, the kind of nervous energy that preceded combat. Sir, some of the junior officers are placing bets. Vex approached his throne quietly. On whether the humans will actually show up. And most betting they won't, but the odds are shifting. Something about Ambassador Vale's certainty has them spooked. Spooked crews make mistakes. Yes, sir. Should I address it? Dravix thought of the young human woman, her calm delivery of an absurd threat, her strange sadness. No, he said finally. Let them be nervous. Nervous crews stay alert. And if nothing happens, he checked the countdown timer. 14 hours remaining. If nothing happens, we'll have a good story about the time the Third Armada got worried about a diplomatic bluff. Vex smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. And if something does happen, then we'll wish we'd been more nervous. 12 hours, 6 hours, 1 hour. Dravix stood at the primary viewport, watching Threshold Prime rotate slowly in the eternal darkness. Behind him, the bridge had fallen into focused silence. Every station manned, every system primed, every weapon ready. 317 warships in perfect formation. The largest battle group in a generation. And he was waiting for a threat he couldn't see delivered by an ambassador who'd spoken with the certainty of someone who knew the future. Sir, 30 minutes to deadline. Cortland's voice was steady, professional. Long-range sensors still clear. No contacts, no anomalies. Whatever they planned, they're not... Wait! The sensor officer's claws danced across his console. Sir, I'm picking up. No, that can't be right. Every head on the bridge turned. Report, Dravix commanded. Energy signature, sir. Just appeared at the system edge. Distance 42 million kilometers, bearing 273 Mark 15. Classification. The sensor officer's scales paled. Sir, the readings aren't making sense. It's registering as a single object, but the mass displacement is... He trailed off, staring at his screens. But what? Dravix's voice cut through the sudden tension like a blade. The sensor officer looked up. His eyes were wide, with something between confusion and fear. Sir, if these readings are accurate, that single object is generating more energy than our entire armada combined. The bridge fell silent. Dravix felt his heart's hammer in his chest. Decades of combat, decades of tactical analysis, decades of understanding warfare. And in that moment he knew. Ambassador Arya Vale hadn't been bluffing. Confirm those readings. Dravix's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. Full diagnostic on all sensor systems. I want verification from multiple sources. Confirming, sir. The sensor officer's claws flew across his console. Running diagnostics. Sensors operating within normal parameters. Cross-referencing with 16 other ships in the fleet, all reporting identical readings. On the primary tactical display, a new marker appeared, pulsing at the edge of the threshold system. One single point of light in the darkness. Energy output is holding steady, the sensor officer continued. Sir, this is impossible. Nothing should be able to generate that much power. The readings suggest a contained stellar reactor or something we don't understand, Vex finished quietly. Dravix stared at the marker. All his experience and all his knowledge screamed that this was wrong. Ships didn't work like this. Physics didn't allow it. But the sensors didn't lie. Distance to contact. 42 million kilometers in closing. Current velocity. Sir, it's accelerating. Battle stations. All ships. Dravix's command rang across the bridge. Bring the Third Armada to full combat readiness. Across 317 warships, crews rushed to their posts. Weapon systems powered up. Shield generators hummed to life. The quiet efficiency of preparation transforming into the focused intensity of imminent combat. Contact is maintaining, heading directly toward Threshold Prime, the tactical officer reported. Velocity now 0.72 light speed in real space. Cortland stepped forward, his expression troubled. Sir, that's impossible. No known propulsion system can achieve sustained sublight speeds above 0.04. They're moving 18 times faster than anything in our database. Apparently, Dravix said quietly, we need to update our database. The marker moved across the tactical display with terrible purpose. Not the cautious approach of a military vessel entering hostile space. Not the careful maneuvering of a force testing defenses. Just inexorable forward motion. Like the contact knew exactly where it was going and nothing would divert it from that course. Time to weapons range. At current velocity, they'll enter extreme missile range in 4 minutes. Energy weapon range in 7. Visual trying to resolve, sir. The contact is still too distant for clear imaging. But we're getting mass readings now, sir. The sensor officer's voice cracked slightly. Sir, the mass displacement is climbing. Our systems are having difficulty establishing a coherent profile. Show me what we have. The main view screen flickered. A grainy long-range feed replaced the peaceful view of Threshold Prime. At first, Dravix thought the image was corrupted. There was too much ship. The resolution kept adjusting, trying to find edges, boundaries, some coherent shape. But the object seemed to extend beyond the frame of reference. Computer established scale reference, Vex ordered. A silhouette appeared on screen. A Caladrian dreadnought, 2 kilometers of Imperial engineering. The largest class of warship in the Armada. Pride of the fleet. The computer placed it next to the approaching contact. Dravix heard someone on the bridge make a choking sound. The human vessel dwarfed the dreadnought, not by a factor of 2 or 3. The Caladrian ship looked like a service shuttle parked beside a planetary habitat. Computer verify scale, Dravix commanded, his voice hollow. Scale verified, the synthetic voice replied with infuriating calm. Contact length 43.6 kilometers. Width at widest point 19.2 kilometers. Height 8.7 kilometers. Mass displacement equivalent to a Class 7 orbital station. 43 kilometers. The number refused to process. Dravix had commanded ships. He'd fought battles involving hundreds of vessels. He understood naval architecture, engineering limitations, the physics of what could and couldn't exist. This couldn't exist. That's not a ship, someone whispered. Dravix thought it might have been Vex. That's a mobile fortress. The image was resolving now as the contact closed the distance. Details emerging from the grainy feed. Angular armor plating that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. Structures whose purpose Dravix couldn't immediately identify. Sensor arrays the size of buildings. And it was beautiful, in the way a supernova was beautiful, in the way a black hole's event horizon was beautiful. Terrible and magnificent and utterly beyond human, beyond Caladrian scale. Sir, do we engage? Cortland's voice pulled Dravix back to the immediate situation. Engage, yes. That was the question, wasn't it? 317 warships, each one formidable. Together, an overwhelming force that had conquered species-claimed systems enforced the Imperium's will across a dozen sectors, against one ship. One impossible ship that was now close enough for detailed scans. Weapons range in 90 seconds, the tactical officer reported. All fleet elements standing by for firing orders. Dravix made his decision. Deploy intercept group Theta, he ordered. 50 vessels, standard intimidation formation, close to within 10,000 kilometers, and demand their surrender. Sir, Cortland questioned. 50 ship. If it's a bluff, 50 is more than enough. If it's not, Dravix didn't finish the thought. I want to see what they do, how they respond, whether that vessel is actually combat capable or just large. Across the Armada, 50 Caladrian warships broke formation. They moved with practiced precision, years of drill and discipline, guiding them into a three-dimensional web around the human vessel's projected path. Dravix watched them deploy, beautiful in their own way, predators moving to encircle prey, each ship positioning itself to create overlapping fields of fire, multiple angles of attack, no escape vector, textbook execution. Intercept Group Theta reports weapons lock achieved, Vex announced. Group leader requests permission to open communications. Granted, put it on main display. The view screen split. On one side, the massive human vessel continued its approach, now close enough that individual surface features were visible. On the other side appeared Group Leader Torvak, a veteran commander whose scales bore scars from 24 engagements. Unidentified human vessel, Torvak's voice boomed with practiced authority. This is Group Leader Torvak of the Caladrian Imperial Navy. You are in violation of claimed territorial space. You will immediately cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. You have 30 seconds to comply. Silence. The human vessel continued its approach. Velocity unchanged. Course unchanged. 20 seconds. Nothing. 25, 30. Still nothing. No response from the human vessel, Torvak reported. They're still approaching. Distance now 8,000 kilometers and closing. Recommend the communication cutoff. Every display on the Obsidian Dominion's bridge flickered, just for a moment, like static passing through systems that should have been immune to such interference. When the display stabilized, a new feed had appeared on the main view screen. It showed a bridge, the human bridge. Dravix had expected something primitive, perhaps chaotic. What he saw instead was a cathedral of controlled purpose. The human bridge was vast, with multiple levels visible in the depth of the image. Dozens of humans worked at stations that glowed with soft blue light. Their movements were calm, precise, professional. The architecture was clean, almost austere. None of the ornamental excess that marked Caladrian ship design. Everything looked functional, purposeful. And at the center of it all, seated in a raised command chair that bore a striking resemblance to Dravix's own throne, sat a human woman. She was older than Ambassador Arya, silver gray streaking through dark hair pulled back in a severe military style. She wore a dark uniform without excessive decoration, though Dravix's experienced eye caught subtle insignias that spoke of rank and authority. Her face was composed, her dark eyes sharp and evaluating as she looked directly into the camera, directly at him. Supreme Commander Kael Theron Dravix. Her voice carried quiet authority that made the bridge of his flagship feel suddenly smaller. I am Fleet Admiral Serafina Vale of the Terran Coalition Navy. Vale, the same surname as the ambassador. You were given 72 hours to withdraw from the threshold system. Admiral Vale continued. You did not withdraw. Dravix found his voice. Admiral Vale, I assume Ambassador Arya is related to you? My daughter. No emotion in the words, just fact. Then you should know that I gave her a fair hearing, but one ship, however large, cannot stand against the might of the Third Armada. I strongly suggest you reverse course before this situation escalates beyond diplomatic resolution. Admiral Vale's expression didn't change. Supreme Commander, you currently have 50 vessels surrounding my ship in what you believe is an intimidation formation. She knew their exact number, their formation, before anyone had told her. I need you to understand something very clearly, Vale continued. We did not come here to negotiate. We came here to enforce the withdrawal we requested. I'm giving you one final opportunity to comply. Order your forces to leave the threshold system immediately. The audacity of it struck Dravix like a physical blow. You're giving me an ultimatum, Admiral. He kept his voice level. I have 317 warships at my command. You have one ship and apparently no understanding of military mathematics. I have one ship, Admiral Vale agreed. That is correct. Dravix leaned forward in his command throne. Then I suggest you use whatever advanced technology allowed you to build something that size and retreat while you still can. I don't want to destroy you, Admiral, but I will if you force me. For the first time, something flickered across Vale's face. Not fear, not anger, sadness. The same expression he'd seen on Ambassador Arya. Supreme Commander, Vale said quietly, you have 50 ships within weapons range of my vessel right now. I'm going to activate our defensive screens. I need you to watch what happens to your sensor readings when I do. She turned slightly. Weapons officer brings screens to standard operational power. A young human male at a nearby console touched his display. Screens active, Admiral, radiating at 20% capacity. 20%, Dravix noted. They were deliberately showing restraint. Or, every alarm on the Obsidian Dominion's bridge shrieked to life simultaneously. Supreme Commander. The sensor officer's voice cracked with panic. Energy spike. The human vessel, just the power output just increased by a factor of... He stopped, his claws trembling over his console. Sir, the readings can't be right. No ship can generate that much power. Confirmed, Dravix roared. Confirmed, sir. Multiple redundant systems, confirming the human ship is radiating energy at levels that should require a contained singularity. Their defensive screens alone are drawing more power than our entire fleet's reactor output combined. On the view screen, Admiral Vale watched him with those dark, patient eyes. Supreme Commander, she said, what you're seeing is my ship operating at minimal defensive power. We are currently running on auxiliary systems only. I can increase output if you need further demonstration, but I'd prefer not to. Your sensor equipment appears to be struggling with the current readings. Dravix stared at the tactical display, numbers that made no sense. Energy outputs that violated everything he knew about physics and engineering. A bluff. It had to be a bluff. They were broadcasting false sensor data, overwhelming his systems with spoofed signals. No ship could actually generate that kind of power. The physics didn't allow it. Group leader Torvak, Dravix said, keeping his voice steady. Fire a warning shot across the human vessel's bow. Minimal power. I want to see how their defenses actually perform. There was a pause. Sir, are you certain our tactical analysis suggests? Do it. From his position 8,000 kilometers away, Torvak complied. A single particle beam lanced out from one of the intercepting cruisers. A precisely calculated shot designed to pass within 100 meters of the human vessel's hull, close enough to demonstrate capability, far enough to avoid actual engagement. The beam struck the human defensive screen and simply stopped, not deflected, not absorbed in a shower of energy dissipation. It just stopped, frozen in space for a fraction of a second before dissipating harmlessly. By the ancestors, Cortland breathed. On the view screen, Admiral Vale's expression finally changed, not to anger, to disappointment. That was unwise, Supreme Commander, she said quietly. You just fired on a Terran Coalition naval vessel. Under our rules of engagement, that constitutes an act of war. Dravix felt cold certainty settle over him. This wasn't a bluff. This was real. And he had just made a terrible mistake. The silence on the bridge of the Obsidian Dominion stretched like a chasm. Kale Theron Dravix stared at Admiral Serafina Vale on the view screen. She looked tired, not afraid, not angry, just exhausted. Like someone who'd carried a heavy burden for too long and had genuinely hoped she wouldn't have to set it down this way. However, Vale continued, her voice carrying that same quiet authority, I'm going to make an assumption that you didn't understand what you were dealing with. I'm willing to attribute this to ignorance rather than malice, but only once. She leaned forward slightly in her command chair. Let me be very clear about your situation, Supreme Commander. The vessel you are facing is the TCS Eternal Vigil, a Titan-class fleet carrier. She is 43.6 kilometers long. She mounts 472 primary weapon systems. She carries a crew of 18,000. Vale's dark eyes never left his. Her reactor core operates on principles your scientists haven't discovered yet. Her armor is composed of materials your weapons cannot penetrate. Her defensive screens can withstand a sustained bombardment from every ship in your fleet simultaneously for approximately, she glanced at an officer who consulted a display, 4 hours and 17 minutes, Admiral. Assuming they maintain continuous fire and we don't maneuver or return fire. The officer's voice was clinical, professional. like reading a weather report. 4 hours, Vale repeated, before we would need to divert power from non-essential systems to maintain our screens. Drevix felt something crack inside his certainty, understanding how warfare worked, how ships functioned, how physics operated, all of it screaming that what she was saying couldn't be true. But the sensor readings didn't lie. Supreme Commander Vale said, and now her voice softened just slightly, "You are not facing a ship. You are facing a mobile weapons platform designed specifically to enforce territorial sovereignty against numerically superior forces. We are very, very good at what we do." Dravix found his voice. It sounded hollow even to his own ears. "What do you want? I want you to leave the threshold system. I want you to return the colonists you displaced. And I want you to transmit a formal apology to the Terran Coalition for violating our territorial sovereignty. You have 1 hour to begin compliance. And if I refuse," Vale's expression softened, but not with cruelty, with something that might have been pity, "then, Supreme Commander, you will discover exactly why humanity doesn't demonstrate our military capabilities casually. We prefer peace. We genuinely do, but we did not build ships like the Eternal Vigil expecting to use them as deterrents. We built them because we knew eventually someone would make the mistake you're making right now." She gestured to someone off-screen. "Send the Supreme Commander the full tactical specifications for a Titan-class carrier. Let him understand what he's facing. Maybe it will help him make the right choice." A data packet appeared in Dravix's command queue. Colonel Reese Cortland opened it automatically. Then his scales went pale as ghost light. "Sir," Cortland's voice shook, "if even half of these specifications are accurate, we can't win this fight. We can't even survive it." Dravix looked at the human admiral on his screen, at the massive ship that hung in space like a monument to humanity's hidden power, at the sensor readings that screamed impossibility with every passing second. "You have 1 hour, Supreme Commander," Vale said. "I suggest you use it wisely. Vale out." The screen went dark. "Sir Group Leader Torvak is requesting orders." Dravix stood frozen in front of the blank view screen. Around him, the bridge crew waited. 317 warships waited. An entire armada holding its breath for his next command. Decades of service. Decades of victories. And now, for the first time, genuine uncertainty. Sir Cortland stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What are your orders?" What were his orders? A retreat without firing a shot, return to high command, and admit he'd been intimidated by a single ship, watch his career, his reputation. Everything he'd built collapse because he'd chosen survival over honor, or fight, and lose, but at least lose on his feet. Prove that the Third Armada wasn't cowed by impossible technology and threats. Go down in history as the commander who stood his ground even against overwhelming odds. Die with honor, or live with shame. "Maintain formation," Dravix heard himself say. I need to review the tactical data." He turned and walked toward his ready room. Each step felt like moving through deep water. Heavy, slow. Behind him, Cortland began coordinating with fleet elements. Professional, efficient, buying him time to think. Time to decide if 317 ships and thousands of lives were worth his pride. The ready room doors sealed behind him with a pneumatic hiss. Dravix stood alone in the small chamber. His private space. Awards on the walls. Commendations. Photos of victories. Evidence that he knew what he was doing. He pulled up the technical specifications Admiral Vale had sent. The data scrolled across holographic displays. Power generation equivalent to a contained stellar reactor. Defensive capabilities, regenerative armor plating, multi-layered energy screens, point defense networks that could track and neutralize thousands of incoming threats simultaneously. Weapons systems energy lances that operated on principles labeled simply as classified, principles unknown, electromagnetic cascade generators, kinetic bombardment platforms, plasma batteries, and a note at the bottom, specifications shown represent standard operational parameters at 20% capacity. 20%. The ship, currently radiating enough power to blind half his sensors, was operating at 1/5 of its capability. Dravix sat heavily in his chair. The smart move was obvious. Withdraw, accept the loss, preserve his fleet, his crews, their lives. Return to fight another day. But decades of military doctrine screamed against it. You didn't retreat from a single enemy vessel. You didn't surrender superior numbers. You didn't abandon a strategic position because someone showed you impressive technology. You stood your ground, you fought, you won, or you died trying. His personal communicator chimed. the private channel, the one only his wife knew. Dravix hesitated, then activated it. Her hologram appeared smaller than the bridge displays, but infinitely more real. Concern etched in every line of her face. Kyle, I've been monitoring the public feeds. They're saying there's a human superweapon in the threshold system, that the Third Armada might be in danger. The reports are accurate. Her expression crumbled. Come home, please. Just order the retreat and come home. If I do that, everything I've built will still end there. Her voice cracked. Your reputation will survive. Your career will survive. But if you fight this, if those reports are true, you won't survive. Dravix looked at his wife. 58 years together, she'd stood beside him through promotions and demotions, through victories that made him a hero and mistakes that nearly ended his career, through the birth of their children and the loss of comrades. She'd never asked him to retreat before. They gave me an hour, he said quietly, to decide if I'm willing to throw away everything for pride. It's not pride to choose life, Kyle. It's wisdom. And if I'm wrong, if their ship isn't as powerful as they claim, if this is all psychological warfare and I retreat from a bluff, then you'll be alive to rebuild. But if you're right, if they are that powerful and you fight anyway. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The hologram flickered. Time delay catching up. I love you, his wife said. More than I love the hero. More than I love the commander. I love the man. Come home to me. The transmission ended. Dravix sat in silence. The smart move, the safe move, the move that would let him see his wife again, hold his grandchildren, retire with honor, and live to old age surrounded by people who loved him. All he had to do was give the order. Withdraw. His hand hovered over the communication panel. Then he thought of every species the Caladrian Imperium had conquered. Every battle where superior numbers crushed inferior forces. Every time he'd stood on a bridge and watched enemies surrender because they understood the mathematics of war. If he retreated now, that's how history would remember him. The commander who had overwhelming numerical superiority and ran from a single ship. Dravix pulled his hand back. He would give the humans their demonstration. Let them show him this incredible power they'd built. And if it was real, if they truly were that advanced, then he would accept defeat, but not before they proved it. Dravix returned to the bridge 20 minutes later. His command crew looked up as he emerged from the ready room, faces tense, waiting for his decision. 317 ships hanging in the balance. Group leader Torvak, Dravix said, his voice steady, you will conduct a limited engagement. Full weapons spread 50 ships sustained bombardment for 90 seconds. I want to see if those shields are as impenetrable as Admiral Vale claims. Cortland stepped forward. Sir, she said that would constitute an act of war. She said firing on her vessel was an act of war. We already did that with the warning shot. This is accepting the war, she declared. Dravix looked at his second-in-command. I need to know Reese. I need to see for myself. And if the shields hold, then we'll reassess. It was a lie, and they both knew it, but Cortland nodded anyway. The order went out. 50 Caladrian warships, each one a predator in its own right, opened fire on the TC's Eternal Vigil. Particle beams, plasma lances, kinetic projectiles, missile swarms, everything in the arsenal of modern naval warfare unleashed simultaneously. The space around the human ship lit up like a newborn star. Dravix watched on the tactical display, watched the overlay of weapons fire converging, watched energy readings spike as 50 ships poured everything they had into a single target. The bombardment was beautiful in its terrible way, coordinated, precise, overwhelming. For 90 seconds, the Eternal Vigil disappeared behind a maelstrom of destructive force. Then as suddenly as it began, the barrage ceased. The displays cleared. The human ship hung in space serene and untouched, wrapped in a defensive field that glowed faintly blue-white, like it was wearing a second skin made of captured starlight. Impact assessment, Dravix ordered, though his gut already knew the answer. The sensor officer's voice was hollow. No damage, sir. Zero penetration. The human shields aren't even fluctuating. It's like we're not even shooting at them. On the main view screen, the image of Admiral Vale's bridge reappeared. The human admiral sat in her command chair, her expression unchanged, like she'd been waiting patiently for them to finish their futile gesture. Supreme Commander Dravix, she said quietly, you've now engaged a Terran coalition vessel with lethal force. Under our military doctrine, we are authorized to respond in kind. She paused. However, I'm still operating under the assumption that you need to see to believe. So I'm going to show you something, not to humiliate you, not to demonstrate superiority for its own sake, but because you need to understand what happens next if you don't stand down. Vale turned to her weapons officer. Commander Reeves, activate point defense grid, sector 7 through 19, suppression protocols only. The young human male nodded, activating point defense. Targeting solutions locked on all 50 vessels in engagement range. Fire. Nothing visible happened. No beams, no projectiles, no flashes of light or explosive detonations. But on Dravix's tactical display, the 50 ships surrounding the Eternal Vigil began going dark, one by one like lights being switched off in a vast room. What? Dravix started. Sir, we're receiving emergency signals from the intercept group. The communications officer's voice climbed with panic. Ships reporting total power failure. Weapons offline, engines offline. Life support. Life support is still functioning, but everything else is dead. All of them. Yes, sir. All 50 ships, and it's spreading. More ships went dark on the display. Vessels that hadn't even been in weapons range. Cruisers stationed at the periphery of the formation. Destroyers on patrol routes. 30 seconds. 60 seconds. 90 seconds. 100 ships drifting in space. Crews trapped inside vessels that had become elaborate coffins. Not dead, just helpless. And the Eternal Vigil hadn't even used its main weapons. Electromagnetic cascade, Cortland whispered, reading sensor data. They're not destroying the ships. They're reaching inside them, targeting specific systems, shutting down individual components without damaging the hull. Dravix stared at the tactical display. 100 Caladrian warships, disabled in 90 seconds. Not a single casualty, not one hull breach. Not one life lost, just power and freedom and capability stripped away with surgical precision. Admiral Vale's face remained on the view screen. Supreme Commander, she said, I have just disabled 100 of your vessels while operating at 15% of my ship's combat capability. My weapon systems have barely warmed up. My shields have not been tested. My crew has not even gone to full battle stations. She paused, letting that sink in. I can continue this demonstration. I can shut down every ship in your fleet without destroying a single one. Or, her voice softened, or you can accept that this is real. Accept that humanity has capabilities you didn't know existed. And make the choice that saves lives instead of pride. Dravix felt the weight of 317 ships pressing down on him. Thousands of crew members, families waiting at home, careers and futures, and lives that depended on his next decision. Why? The word came out rough. Why show restraint? You could destroy us. Why disable instead of kill? For the first time, Vale's professional mask cracked slightly. Because I remember what it's like to be helpless, she said. Because 30 years ago, I watched Caladrian ships destroy a human colony vessel. Unarmed. Civilian. Fleeing. Your forces didn't even bother accepting surrender. They just erased it. Dravix felt cold wash over him. I know, I've read your record, Commander. You're an honorable man. You follow rules of engagement. You treat prisoners well. You conduct war like a professional. Her eyes held his. But your Imperium isn't just you, and not every Caladrian commander follows your code. She leaned forward. I watched 3,000 people die that day, Commander, including my husband, my son, my parents. I was a scientist then, not a soldier. I survived because I was lucky. Because I hid in a cargo pod and drifted for 8 days before a rescue ship found me. The words fell like stones into still water. So I spent the next 20 years making sure humanity would never be helpless again, Vale continued. We built these ships. We developed these weapons. We bankrupted ourselves, creating a military force that could face the galaxy and say, never again. But, her voice softened, but I also remember what it feels like to be on the other side. To be the one outmatched and outgunned and completely at someone else's mercy. So when I have the power to destroy, I choose instead to disable. When I can kill, I choose to spare. Because the universe has enough killing, Commander. What it needs is more mercy. Dravix stared at the woman on his screen. An old soldier, a widow, a survivor who'd transformed grief into overwhelming force and then chosen restraint. You built all this, he said quietly, so you wouldn't have to use it. Yes. And you're showing me mercy because you remember what it's like to receive none. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Two commanders, two old soldiers, separated by species and allegiance, but united by the weight of command and the terrible burden of deciding who lives and who dies. I have 100 disabled ships, Dravik said, crews trapped inside. I'm already dispatching rescue craft, Vale replied. They'll assist with power restoration and emergency evacuation if needed. Your people will be safe. You're helping us. I disabled them, Commander. I'm responsible for their welfare until they're recovered. She said it like it was obvious, like it was the only decent thing to do. Dravix looked at Cortland, at Vex, at the bridge crew who'd served under him through countless engagements. Young officers who trusted his judgment, veterans who'd followed him for years. He thought of his wife, waiting, praying. He thought of 100 ships already disabled, 217 still operational. The mathematics, simple and terrible. She could do this to all of them, whenever she wanted, however she wanted. Request permission for private channel, Dravik said. Just the two of us. Vale nodded. Granted. The bridge feed cut, privacy screens activated. For a moment, it was just two old soldiers in the darkness between stars. Why warn us at all? Dravik asked. You have this power. You could have simply appeared and destroyed us. Made an example. Shown the galaxy what happens to those who threaten humanity. Because power without restraint is tyranny, Vale replied. I want you to choose peace, Commander. Not fear it. There's a difference between us. I've spent my career believing strength must be demonstrated. And I've spent 20 years building strength, so I never have to demonstrate it. Vale's voice carried the weariness of long experience. We're both old soldiers, Commander. We know what war costs. We've paid those costs too many times. Dravix thought of the Pelthian commander. The respectful surrender, the mercy granted and received. Traditional doctrine, he said, assumes both sides follow the same rules. Does it, Vale asked? Or does it simply assume both sides have equivalent power? That victory requires honorable combat between matched forces. She was right and he knew it. Traditional doctrine worked when battles were fought between peers, when both sides had a chance, when honor mattered because either side could win. But this wasn't that. This was a contest between eras, between what warfare used to be and what it had become. Why build this? Dravix gestured at the displays, though Vale couldn't see them. Why spend 20 years bankrupt your economy, devote everything to creating ships like this, if you genuinely wanted peace? Silence for a moment. Then Vale spoke, and her voice carried a weight that pressed on his chest. My daughter was 6 years old when the colony ship died. She was with my parents. I was supposed to be there too, but my research lab was short-staffed, so I took a later shuttle. That choice saved my life. She paused. When I was rescued, when I learned what happened, I asked the same question you're asking. Why build weapons if we want peace? And the captain who found me, an old soldier like us, he said something I've never forgotten. What did he say? He said, the strong do what they will, the weak suffer what they must, unless the weak becomes strong enough that the cost of domination exceeds its value. Vale's eyes held his through the screen. So we became strong, Commander. Strong enough that threatening us became suicide. Strong enough that the mathematics of aggression no longer worked. And then we chose peace anyway. Because strength without mercy is just another form of weakness. Dravix absorbed that. The logic was flawless. The philosophy sound. But something still nagged at him. You're asking me to retreat, he said, to return to my Imperium and admit that a single human ship outmatched 300 Caladrian vessels. You're asking me to destroy my career, my reputation, everything I've built. For what? For the lives of your crews. For the future where our species coexist instead of destroy each other. For the chance to be remembered as the commander who chose wisdom over pride. And if I fight anyway. Vale's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Dravix think of event horizons. The point of no return. Then you'll learn what the eternal vigil can do when I stop showing restraint, she said quietly. And I promise you, Commander, that's not something you want to witness, because I've been very, very gentle so far. Dravix believed her. He looked at the tactical display showing his fleet, his command, his responsibility. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that? Yes. Is this ship alone or is it part of a larger force? Vale held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, she answered. The Eternal Vigil is one of 74 Titan-class carriers in the Terran Coalition Navy. 74, The number hit like a physical blow. That's just the Titan class, Vale continued. We have 6 other ship classifications in our fleet. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, dreadnoughts, command carriers, and one class we've never deployed because we've never needed to. She leaned forward. Commander, the Eternal Vigil represents less than 2% of humanity's total naval capability. I'm showing you this not to terrify you, though I suspect I am. I'm showing you this because you need to understand the decision you're about to make, which is whether to accept reality now while the cost is just pride, or learn it later when the pace is measured in ships and vows and futures that can never be recovered. Dravik sat in his command chair surrounded by awards and commendations and proof of decades of victory, all of it meaningless, all of it built on assumptions that no longer held. If I retreat, he said slowly, my career ends. High Command will court-martial me for abandoning a strategic position. The Imperium will see it as weakness. Every species we've conquered will sense blood in the water. Perhaps, Vale said, or perhaps you'll be the commander who prevented a massacre, who recognized when the rules had changed and adapted instead of dying for outdated doctrine. That's not how military politics works. Then change how military politics works. Her voice hardened slightly. Your Kael Theron Dravix, decades of honorable service, more victories than most commanders see in a lifetime. If anyone has the moral authority to say the old ways no longer serve us, it's you. You're asking me to betray everything I believe in. No, Vale said quietly. I'm asking you to evolve what you believe in. Honor isn't standing your ground when you know you'll lose. Honor is making the hard choice that saves lives even when it costs you personally. Dravix closed his eyes. Decades of believing he understood how the galaxy worked, how power functioned, how wars were won, all of it crumbling in the face of one human ship and one human admiral who'd built overwhelming force and chose restraint. I need time, he said. You have 37 minutes left of your hour, Vale replied. Use them wisely, Commander. The private channel closed. Dravik sat alone in the command chair and tried to decide who he wanted to be. The commander who died with honor, or the commander who lived with wisdom. 23 minutes passed in silence. Dravix reviewed tactical data, raid casualty projections, analyzed every possible scenario where the Third Armada emerged victorious. There were none. Even the most optimistic simulations, assuming the Eternal Vigil's specifications were exaggerated by 50%, showed catastrophic losses. Best case, 40% casualties. Worst case, total fleet destruction. And that was against one ship. 74 existed. The mathematics were clear, the outcome inevitable. But mathematics had never accounted for pride. Dravik stood and returned to the bridge. His command crew looked up, faces hopeful, desperate for orders that made sense of the impossible situation they found themselves in. Communications, Dravik said. Open a channel to High Command, Priority Alpha. Sir, Cortland stepped forward. Are you requesting permission to withdraw? No. The bridge fell silent. I'm requesting permission to engage, Dravix continued. Full fleet assault, everything we have. Sir, Vex's voice carried shock. The tactical analysis shows, I can read Commander. I know what it shows. Dravix turned to face his senior staff. But I also know what retreating without firing a shot means. For the Imperium, for our fleet, for every species watching this confrontation. He gestured at the displays. If we withdraw now, we prove that numerical superiority means nothing. That 300 ships can be intimidated by one. That the Caladrian Imperium, the dominant military power in this sector, can be cowed by technological advantage and harsh words. We also preserve our forces, Cortland said quietly. Live to fight another day. Against an enemy that has 74 ships like that one, there is no other day, Reese. There's only this moment, this choice. Dravix looked at each of his senior officers. I'm not ordering this assault because I think we'll win. I know we won't, but I'm ordering it because history will remember whether we stood our ground or ran, and I'd rather be remembered as the commander who died fighting impossible odds than the one who surrendered without even trying. Vex's scales flushed with emotion. Sir, there's no shame in tactical withdrawal when facing superior technology. Isn't there? Dravix's voice softened. Commander, I've spent decades building a reputation. For honor, for courage, for never backing down. If I retreat now, all of that means nothing. I become just another officer who talked a good game until the stakes got real. Better a living officer with a damaged reputation than a dead one with an intact one, Cortland argued. You say that now, but you've never faced the alternative. The channel to High Command crackled open. The image of High Chancellor Morath appeared, the eldest of the council architect of 3 decades of Caladrian expansion. Supreme Commander Dravix, we've been monitoring the situation. The technical core is analyzing the data you transmitted. Initial assessment suggests the human vessel is unprecedented. Yes, High Chancellor. And you're requesting permission to engage anyway. I am. Morath's ancient eyes studied Dravix through the hologram. Why? Because if we don't, the Imperium's position in this sector collapses. Every species we've dominated will see weakness. Every rival will sense opportunity. The Third Armada retreating from a single ship becomes the story that unmakes everything we've built. And if you attack and lose, then we prove we weren't afraid. We demonstrate that the Caladrian Imperium doesn't surrender without testing the enemy's strength. We force humanity to show their full capability, which gives our intelligence services real data for future planning. It was rationalization, and they both knew it. But it was rationalization that served the Imperium's narrative needs. Morath was silent for a long moment. You understand, he said finally, that if you lose badly, you'll be posthumously blamed for the disaster. History won't remember you as brave. It'll remember you as the fool who threw away 300 ships for pride. I understand. And you're ordering this anyway. Dravix thought of his wife, his family, the quiet retirement he'd always imagined after decades of service, all of it slipping away. I am, he said, because someone has to prove to humanity that we're not afraid, even if we should be. Morath nodded slowly. Permission granted. The Imperium honors your courage, Commander. Whatever happens next, know that you served with distinction. The transmission ended. Dravix turned to his bridge crew. They stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to resignation to grim determination. All ships, Dravix commanded. Full assault formation. Every vessel, every weapon, simultaneous strike. We hit them with everything we have. Cortland stepped forward one last time. Sir, please, think about what you're doing. Those crews have families. I know. Dravix's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I know, Reese, but this is what command means. Making impossible choices. Sacrificing pieces on a board for the larger strategy. I don't expect you to agree. I'm not even sure I agree, but I'm certain that if we don't do this, the Imperium falls. And I won't let decades of service end with me being the commander who triggered that collapse. He looked at his friend, his second in command, the officer who'd followed him through 2 decades of campaigns. I'm not asking you to die for nothing, Dravix said. I'm asking you to die proving we weren't cowards. That when faced with the impossible, we faced it head-on instead of running. Is that enough? Cortland's jaw tightened. Then slowly he nodded. It'll have to be. Across the Third Armada, 217 warships still operational moved into attack formation. Weapons hot, targeting solutions locked. Every commander ready to unleash the full fury of the Imperial Navy. For pride, for legacy, for honor that no longer worked but still demanded tribute. Dravix opened a channel to the eternal vigil. Admiral Serafina Vale appeared on screen. She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw understanding. Sad, weary understanding. You're going to attack anyway, she said. Not a question. I have to. No, Commander. You don't. You're choosing to. There's a difference. Perhaps. Dravix straightened in his command chair. But it's the choice I can live with, or die with, as the case may be. Vale closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the sadness had been joined by something harder, more resolved. Then I'm sorry, she said. I genuinely am, for what you're about to experience. For the lives that will be lost because of this choice. For the fact that I tried to prevent this and failed. She turned to her crew. All hands battle stations. Authorization code Vale Alpha 7 actual. Weapons free. Full defensive protocols. Show them what they're facing, but for God's sake try to minimize casualties. Her weapons officer nodded. Yes, Admiral. May God have mercy. Vale's voice was barely a whisper. He won't. But maybe we can. She looked at Dravix one final time. Supreme Commander, what you're about to see is not personal. It's not revenge. It's simply what happens when you force a Titan-class carrier to defend itself. I want you to remember that you were warned. Remember that you were given every opportunity to choose peace, Dravix met her gaze. 2 old soldiers, about to write history in fire and death. I'll remember, he said. Admiral Vale, thank you for trying. The screen went dark. Dravix stood and walked to the primary viewport. Behind him, Cortland began the final countdown. All ships report ready, firing solutions locked. Waiting on your command, sir. Dravix looked out at the stars, eternal, uncaring. Witnesses to countless battles over countless millennia. One more wouldn't matter, except to the people about to die. Fire, he said quietly, then louder, all ships fire. And 317 warships unleashed hell. Space became light. 317 warships fired simultaneously. Every weapon, every system, every ounce of destructive force the Caladrian Imperium had engineered over centuries of conquest. Particle beams carved luminous tracks through vacuum. Plasma lances superheated the darkness. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. Missile swarms blossomed like deadly flowers, each one carrying enough explosive force to crack a small moon, all of it converging on a single point. The TCS Eternal Vigil. Kael, Theron, and Dravix watched from the viewport of the Obsidian Dominion, and for a moment, just a moment, he allowed himself to hope. Because this was beautiful. This was power incarnate, the full fury of an armada that had never known defeat. Weapons fire so dense it created a temporary star in the empty dark between worlds. Energy readings so high, they burned afterimages into his retinas, even through protective filters. If anything could break through those impossible shields, this would be it. The barrage struck and stopped, not deflected in showers of sparks, not absorbed with visible energy dissipation. The weapons simply ceased to exist the moment they touched the shimmering blue-white field surrounding the human vessel. Particle beams vanished as if switched off mid-flight. Missiles detonated against a barrier they couldn't penetrate their explosions, spreading harmlessly across an invisible surface like waves against an infinite shore. Kinetic projectiles stopped dead in space, their momentum stolen by forces Dravix didn't understand. The Eternal Vigil sat in the center of the maelstrom, serene, untouched, wrapped in defensive fields that made 300 ships' worth of firepower look like rain against a mountain. "Maintain fire," Dravix heard himself shouting. "All ships maximum output." The assault intensified. 317 warships pouring everything they had into a single target. The energy expenditure was so massive that power readings across the Obsidian Dominion began dropping. Reactors struggling, systems straining, warning lights flickering across tactical displays. 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. The human shields didn't fluctuate, didn't dim, didn't show even the slightest sign of stress. "Sir, we're overheating," Commander Vex's voice carried an edge of panic Dravix had never heard from her. "Multiple ships reporting power system failures from sustained fire. We can't maintain this rate." "Impact assessment," Dravix demanded, though his eyes already told him everything he needed to know. "Zero penetration, sir, zero damage. Their shields aren't even—" The sensor officer's voice cracked. "Sir, our sensors can't detect any power drain. It's like they're not even feeling this." 120 seconds. The longest 2 minutes of Dravix's life. And then the Eternal Vigil fired back. The human ship's hull seemed to come alive. What Dravix had thought were armor plates or sensor arrays began to shift. Reconfigure. Ports opened along the vessel's 43-kilometer length, revealing weapon systems that glowed with pale blue light. Hundreds of them. "Incoming fire," the tactical officer screamed. "Energy signatures across the hull. Multiple active weapon ports, I'm counting. Ancestors preserve us, I'm counting over 400 active systems." The point defense weapons fired first. No visible beams, no projectiles, just impossibility. Ships began going dark. One moment, a Caladrian destroyer was maneuvering for a better firing angle, all systems operational, crew fighting desperately. The next moment, every electronic system shut down. Weapons offline, engines dead, life support flickering to emergency backup. Another cruiser tried to break formation, tried to retreat. Its power core simply stopped. No explosion, no damage, just darkness and silence, and a crew trapped inside a tomb that still had air to breathe but nothing else. "What are they doing?" Cortland's voice barely registered above the chaos of alarms and panicked communications flooding the bridge. "Electromagnetic cascade weapons," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "But not like anything in our database. They're not destroying ships. They're reaching inside them, targeting specific systems, shutting down individual components without damaging the hull. 30 ships disabled in 15 seconds, 60 ships in 30 seconds, 100 ships drifting, helpless in 45 seconds. And the Eternal Vigil still hadn't used its main batteries. Dravix watched the tactical display as his fleet, his command, his responsibility was systematically dismantled, not destroyed, neutralized. Like a surgeon removing tumors with precision instruments instead of a butcher hacking with a cleaver. She was still showing restraint. Even now, even after he'd forced this confrontation, Admiral Serafina Vale was holding back. The realization hit harder than any weapon. All ships scatter, Dravix ordered. Break formation, evasive maneuvers. Too late. The main batteries fired. They were mounted along the Eternal Vigil's central axis. Massive weapon systems Dravix had mistaken for structural elements. When they fired, they didn't produce beams or projectiles. They produced absolute destruction delivered at the speed of light. A lance of coherent energy, not plasma, not particles. Something else entirely reached out and touched a Caladrian heavy cruiser. For a fraction of a second, the cruiser's shields flared, its armor superheated. Its crew had time to understand what was happening. Then the ship simply ceased to exist. Not exploded, not broken apart. One moment it was there, 2 kilometers of military engineering, 500 crew members, families waiting at home, futures unlived. The next moment, nothing but expanding vapor and radiation signatures. Ancestors. Vex's whisper carried across the bridge. The main battery fired again, and again, and again. Each shot erased a Caladrian warship from existence. Each blast traveled faster than point defense could track, faster than ships could evade. The Eternal Vigil's targeting was perfect. Its fire discipline, absolute. It wasn't spraying weapons wildly. It was executing a precise surgical strike against vessels that had ignored the warning, pushed the attack, refused to break off, even when disabled ships littered the battlefield. The ones still trying to kill. Casualties. Dravix heard himself shouting, but his voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Battle Coordinator Casualty Report. Vex's voice was barely audible over chaos. 147 ships destroyed, 93 ships disabled, remaining vessels attempting to break contact. Supreme Commander, we have to retreat. We can't fight this. We can't even survive this. The tactical displays showed the nightmare in cold clinical detail. 317 ships, the pride of the Caladrian Imperium. The largest battle group in a generation, reduced to scattered wreckage and fleeing survivors in less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Dravix had spent decades learning warfare, understanding tactics, mastering the art of command, and in 3 minutes, one human ship had rendered all of it obsolete. Sir, the Eternal Vigil is ceasing fire. Cortland's voice pulled Dravix back to the immediate horror. Admiral Vale is hailing us. On screen, Admiral Serafina Vale appeared. She looked exhausted, older than before, like those 3 minutes had aged her a decade. But there was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, just deep, profound sadness. Supreme Commander Dravix, she said quietly, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to listen very carefully. I have just disabled or destroyed 75% of your fleet. I did this in under 3 minutes while operating at 15% of my vessel's maximum combat capability. She paused. My weapon systems have barely warmed up. My shields have not been tested. My crew has not even gone to full battle stations. This? She gestured at displays Dravix couldn't see, but knew showed the carnage. This is what humanity can do when we're patient, when we show mercy, when we give you every opportunity to choose peace. Vale leaned forward, and the Eternal Vigil is one of 74 Titan-class carriers in the Terran Coalition Navy. The words fell like a hammer on Dravix's chest. 74. That's just the Titan class, Vale continued. We have 6 other ship classifications in our fleet. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, dreadnoughts, command carriers, and Leviathan-class vessels that make the Eternal Vigil look small. She held his gaze through the screen. We have been part of the galactic community for 12 years. In that time, we have watched, we have learned, we have studied every species, every conflict, every war. We built a navy specifically designed to ensure that humanity will never be threatened by any force in this galaxy. And we have kept this secret because we genuinely hoped, that we would never need to use it. Dravix couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. You asked me what one fleet could do against 300 ships, Commander, Vale said. I have just shown you. One ship, one Titan-class carrier, with orders to use minimum necessary force. This is what humanity can do. Behind her, Dravix could see the human bridge crew working with quiet efficiency. No celebration, no excitement, just professionals doing their job, even as they just disabled or destroyed 240 warships. Your remaining vessels are free to leave the threshold system, Vale said. Collect your disabled ships if you can. Rescue the crews still alive. But understand this, the threshold system is human territory. It has always been human territory. And if the Caladrian Imperium ever violates our borders again, if you ever threaten our colonists, if you ever make the mistake of assuming we are weak because we choose peace, her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, I will personally bring all 74 Titan-class carriers to your home system, and I will give your government exactly the same choice I gave you today, leave peacefully, or discover what happens when humanity stops showing restraint. The tactical display showed nightmare. 77 ships still operational, fleeing, running with whatever power they had left. Behind them, 93 ships drifted dark and helpless. And scattered through the debris field, the expanding clouds that had once been 147 Caladrian warships. 6,743 dead. The number scrolled across Dravix's display in clinical precision. 6,743 crew members who would never go home, never see families, never retire to quiet lives and warm memories, dead because of his choice, his pride, his refusal to believe what Admiral Vale had tried to tell him. Sir, Cortland's voice was gentle, too gentle, the voice you use with the wounded, the broken. What are your orders? What were his orders? Dravix stared at the display and tried to find words, tried to find purpose, tried to find anything beyond the crushing weight of failure and death and the terrible certainty that he'd thrown away 6,000 lives for nothing. Signal all surviving ships, he said finally. His voice sounded dead, hollow. Full retreat. Rescue operations for disabled vessels. We're leaving. And the threshold system, Dravix looked at the viewport, at the gas giant that had seemed so valuable just hours ago, at the mineral wealth that had justified occupation, at the human ship still hanging in space like a monument to his arrogance. The threshold system belongs to humanity, he said quietly. It always did. We were just too arrogant to understand what that meant. The Obsidian Dominion turned away, its engines struggling, hulls scorched from sustained weapons fire. Pride shattered. As his flagship began its limping journey toward the system's edge, Dravix caught one final glimpse of the eternal vigil. Even at this distance, even in defeat, part of him still couldn't process what he'd seen. One ship. Humanity had sent one ship, and it had been more than enough. Incoming transmission, sir. The communications officer looked up. Private channel, Admiral Vale. Dravix almost declined. What more could she say? What more was there to hear beyond the evidence of his failure displayed across every screen? But he nodded. Vale's face appeared. She was alone this time. No bridge crew visible, just her in what looked like a private office. The professional mask had slipped. She looked tired, said, human. Commander Dravix, she said, I want you to know something. What happened today wasn't inevitable. You made choices. I made choices. Both of us could have done differently. You gave me every chance to withdraw, Dravix said. I refused. The blood is on my hands. Some of it is on mine, too. Vale's voice was quiet. I could have disabled all your ships, could have made it impossible for you to fight. I chose to show force instead, to prove a point, and people died because of that choice. You were defending your territory. I was making an example. She met his gaze. Commander, I need you to understand why I'm telling you this. Why I'm sending you what I'm about to send you. A data packet appeared in his queue. Those are the locations of 17 of our major fleet bases, Vale said. I've included full sensor profiles. I want you to see what we've built. I want you to understand the scale of the force that's been watching, waiting, hoping we'd never need to use it. Why, Dravix asked. Why show me this? You've already won. Because you need to take a message back to your government, back to every government that's watching this confrontation. The age of conquest through superior numbers is over. Humanity has changed the equation. We've built a military force that makes conventional warfare obsolete. She leaned forward. But we don't want to rule. We don't want empire. We just want to be left alone to build our civilization in peace. And we've proven today that we have the capability to enforce that desire. Dravix looked at the data packet. 17 fleet bases, hundreds of ships, the industrial capacity to build more. You're not threatening me, he said slowly. You're warning me. I'm giving you truth, Vale replied. What you do with it determines whether our species have a future of coexistence or conflict. I'd prefer coexistence, Commander. I think you would too. Even after what I did, After I ignored your warnings, forced this battle, got thousands killed. Vale was quiet for a moment. Commander, you will think about the 6,000 who died today. You'll carry that weight. And that tells me something about the kind of man you are. It tells you I'm a fool who let pride override judgment. It tells me you're capable of learning, of changing, of becoming something better than what you were. Vale held his gaze. The galaxy needs officers like that, Commander. People who can admit mistakes, carry consequences, and still try to do better. We have enough warmongers. What we need are peacemakers. The transmission ended. Dravik sat alone and opened the data packet. 17 fleet bases resolved on his displays. Massive orbital facilities. Shipyards actively constructing new vessels. Energy signatures consistent with hundreds of warships on patrol. She told the truth about everything. The 74 Titan-class carriers were real. The overwhelming force was real. And the restraint, the choice to disable rather than destroy, to spare rather than annihilate, that was real too. 8 hours after the retreat, the emergency session of Caladrian High Command convened. Dravik stood before the assembled council in the Great Hall, stripped of ceremonial armor. His scales dulled with exhaustion and shame. Around him, holographic projections showed the disaster in merciless detail. Wreckage fields, disabled vessels being towed away by human rescue craft, because Vale had sent aid. The footage of the engagement itself played from a dozen different sensor perspectives, each one showing the same impossible reality. High Chancellor Morath sat at the center of the council table, ancient, powerful, the architect of 3 decades of Caladrian expansion. He watched the final moments of the battle in silence. When the footage ended, when the eternal vigil ceased fire and left the broken remnants to flee, he spoke. 214 ships destroyed or disabled, Morath said, his voice like grinding stone. 6,743 casualties, the largest military defeat in Caladrian history. His eyes fixed on Dravik's. In under 3 minutes, by 1 ship. Yes, High Chancellor. There was nothing else to say. And you're certain the sensor data is accurate? Fleet Analyst Kelther stepped forward, her scales bearing the gold markings of the Intelligence Division. High Chancellor, we've analyzed data from 17 different ships cross-referenced with long-range observation posts verified against independent civilian sensor logs. The readings are consistent across all sources. She gestured and a new hologram appeared. Additionally, the humans transmitted complete technical specifications. We initially assumed psychological warfare, but our analysis suggests it was understated. The weapon's performance exceeded specifications by 12%, power generation by 20%. They were trying to help us understand without terrifying us. They failed, muttered War Coordinator Shelkath. Kelther continued. High Chancellor, based on our analysis, a single Titan-class carrier operating at full combat capability could engage our entire home fleet simultaneously and maintain a 93% probability of victory. She paused. If the humans possess 74 such vessels, they possess sufficient military force to subjugate every major power in the known galaxy. Simultaneously. The council chamber fell silent. Dravik stepped forward. High Chancellor, with your permission. Morath gestured. I've had 8 hours to review what happened, Dravik said. The humans have been in the galactic community for 12 years. In that time, they showed us exactly what they wanted us to see. Small colonies, modest vessels, diplomatic behavior. We thought they were weak. He pulled up a star chart. But look at their territorial claims. Small, compact, easily defensible. They never expanded aggressively, never competed for resources. We never considered that they might be hiding. That they let us take threshold, didn't resist, let us think we'd won. Then when we refused their formal demand, they sent 1 ship. Not to negotiate, to teach us a lesson. What lesson? Morath demanded. That the rules have changed, Dravik said quietly. That numerical superiority no longer guarantees victory. That technological advancement has made conventional warfare obsolete. And that humanity has positioned themselves as the dominant force, whether we acknowledge it or not. He looked at each council member. Admiral Vale told me they built their fleet not for conquest, but to ensure they would never be conquered. 20 years of construction. 15% of their economic output. They bankrupted themselves. Why, Shelkath asked. If they have this power, why hide it? Dravik's thought of Vale's tired eyes, her visible reluctance. Because they don't want to conquer, he said. High Chancellor Admiral Vale tried to prevent the engagement even after we fired on her vessel. The Eternal Vigil could have destroyed every ship. Instead, it disabled over 100 vessels, gave their crews a chance to survive. He pulled up another file. After the battle, Admiral Vale sent me this message. Vale appeared on screen in her office. Supreme Commander Dravix, I want you to understand why we built what we built. Humanity learned a hard lesson. Peace through strength only works if the strength is undeniable. Half measures invite testing. But absolute overwhelming superiority demonstrated once properly ends conflicts before they begin. She paused. 30 years ago, my family died when Caladrian ships destroyed an unarmed human colony vessel. I spent 20 years ensuring no human would ever be that helpless again. But I also remembered mercy, because the universe needs more mercy, not more killing. The message was shorter now, direct. No repetition of details the council would find tedious. Just the core truth. The council sat in silence. Finally, Mora spoke. She lost her family to us, and today she showed mercy to the species that killed them. Yes, High Chancellor. The only rational response is diplomatic accommodation, Dravix said. We're not dealing with a species that can be defeated through military force. You're suggesting we negotiate, Shelkath said. Apologize. After we attacked them in their own territory, Dravix corrected. After they gave us 72 hours to withdraw peacefully. After they tried to prevent bloodshed through every means short of surrender. He let that sink in. What's the alternative? War coordinators send more fleets to be destroyed? They have the capability to sterilize our home world from orbit. The only reason they haven't is because they're showing us mercy. Dravix's voice dropped. I suggest we accept it. Morath nodded slowly. Contact the Terran Coalition. Formal diplomatic channels. Express regrets for the incident. Acknowledge their sovereignty. Request negotiations for a formal peace agreement. He stood his authority radiating through the chamber. Spread the word through all military channels. The Threshold System incident is classified as a tragic miscalculation. Human military capabilities are reassessed at the highest threat level. Make this clear to every commander. Humanity is not to be threatened, provoked, or engaged without direct authorization from this council. He looked at Dravix. Supreme Commander, you are hereby reassigned. Retired from military command, effective immediately. You will serve as special envoy to the Terran Coalition. Apparently, you're uniquely qualified to negotiate with a people who can destroy us. Dravix straightened. Not a punishment, an opportunity. Yes, High Chancellor. 3 months later, Kael Theron Dravix stood in a neutral space station orbiting an uninhabited system halfway between Caladrian and human territory. The station was small, diplomatic, built for meetings between species who didn't trust each other but recognized the necessity of dialogue. Through the observation window, Dravix could see both fleets maintaining respectful distance. Caladrian ships on one side, human vessels on the other. One of the human ships was a Titan-class carrier. Not the Eternal Vigil, but one of her sisters. A reminder, a statement, footsteps behind him. Dravix turned. Admiral Seraphina Vale walked across the station's central hub accompanied by a small security detail that maintained discreet distance. She wore her uniform, hair still silver gray, eyes still carrying the weight of command and loss and hard-won wisdom. She stopped a few feet away. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two old soldiers, former enemies, future, something neither quite knew the word for yet. Commander Dravix, Vale said. Or should I say Special Envoy Dravix, I heard about your new position. Retired from military command, Dravix replied. Assigned to diplomatic service. Apparently, I'm uniquely qualified to negotiate treaties with humanity. Because you understand what we're capable of. Because I understand what you chose not to do. Vale's expression softened slightly. How are you, honestly? Dravix considered the question. 3 months since the Threshold System. 3 months of debriefings, tribunals, political maneuvering. 3 months of nightmares about ships dissolving into vapor and crew lists that went on for pages. I'm carrying it, he said finally. The weight, the 6,000 dead, the knowledge that my pride costs lives. I'll carry it until I die, but I'm also learning, trying to understand, trying to be better than I was. That's all any of us can do. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their respective fleets through the viewport. The treaty negotiations are going well, Dravix said. Your diplomats are surprisingly reasonable. We want peace, Commander. We always did. I believe you now. Dravix turned to face her fully. Admiral, I need to ask you something. The colony vessel destroyed 30 years ago. I found it in our classified records. filed as threat neutralization. The commanding officer noted that the vessel refused identification codes, appeared to conduct unauthorized operations, and when hailed, attempted to flee. Vale's jaw tightened. We didn't know your protocols, didn't have your codes. We were just trying to survive in a galaxy we barely understood. I know, and the officer who gave that order is still serving, still commanding, still following the same doctrine. Dravix met her gaze. I'm trying to change that, Admiral. Trying to convince the Imperium that old doctrines don't work anymore, that we need new thinking. But it's difficult, Vale finished. Yes, change always is. How did you do it? How did you take 20 years of grief and anger and channel it into something constructive instead of destructive? Vale was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to the viewport, looking out at the human fleet. I had a choice, she said finally. After I was rescued, after I'd recovered physically, I could become consumed by revenge, dedicate my life to destroying the species that killed my family. Or, or, or I could honor them by ensuring their deaths meant something, by building a future where no one would ever suffer what they suffered, where humanity would never be helpless again, but also where we wouldn't become the monsters we'd feared. She turned back to Dravix. I chose to build, Commander, not to destroy. And some days that choice is harder than others. Some days I wake up and remember my daughter's laugh, my husband's smile, my parents' wisdom, and I want to burn the galaxy down. But you don't. But I don't. Because they wouldn't want that. They were good people, kind people. They believed in building bridges, not walls. So I built them a bridge. 43.6 kilometers long, capable of projecting force across light years, but fundamentally a bridge. Dravix felt something loosen in his chest. Not absolution. He didn't deserve that. But perhaps understanding. I spent my career believing strength had to be demonstrated through victory, he said. That power meant the ability to conquer. You've taught me that real strength is the ability to show mercy even when you have every reason not to. And you're teaching your government that lesson. Trying to. The treaty will help. Formal recognition of human sovereignty, trade agreements, mutual defense protocols. We're building the framework for coexistence instead of conflict. Good, Vale offered a small smile. Because frankly, Commander, I'm tired. Tired of carrying weapons, tired of planning battles, tired of being the person who has to decide when mercy ends and force begins. I'd very much like to retire to a quiet colony somewhere and never see another warship again. But you won't. No, not yet. Not until I'm certain the peace will hold. Not until I know humanity is safe. They stood together, watching the fleets maintain their careful distance. My wife asked me to thank you, Dravix said, for not killing me when you could have, for giving me the chance to come home. Thank her for raising someone who could learn from mistakes instead of dying for them. She also invited you to dinner, if you're ever in Caladrian space. Said she'd like to meet the woman who taught her husband humility. Vale laughed, genuine warm laughter that made her look younger, more human. I'd like that, though fair warning, I'm a terrible dinner guest. I tend to analyze table settings like defensive positions and critique wine selections based on strategic supply logistics. She'll love you. They stood in comfortable silence for a few more moments. Then Vale extended her hand. Dravix took it, the handshake between two old soldiers. Two survivors. Two people who'd seen the worst of what their species could do and were trying in their own ways to build something better. Peace, Commander, Vale said. Peace, Admiral. Vale turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Commander, one more thing. The Eternal Vigil is being retired from active service. After 43 years, she's earned her rest. They're converting her into a museum ship above Earth. A reminder of the day humanity proved our strength and chose not to use all of it. She smiled slightly. Your battle will be remembered, Dravix. Not as a defeat, but as the moment the galaxy learned there were worse things than losing a war, like winning one at the cost of your humanity. She walked away, her security detail falling into step behind her. Dravix stood at the viewport, watching the human fleet in the distance. In the background, visible through the station's panoramic windows, 73 other Titan-class carriers maintained their silent vigil over human space, waiting, hoping they'd never be needed again, but ready if they were. 6 months after the threshold system, Kale Theron Dravix sat in his study on Caldra Prime, surrounded by books and data pads in the quiet comfort of retirement from military command. On his desk, a manuscript, his memoirs, decades of service condensed into words and wisdom and hard-won understanding. He'd been working on the final paragraph for an hour, getting the words right, making sure the lesson was clear. Finally, he read it aloud, testing how it sounded. I spent 4 decades believing I understood warfare, understood power, understood what made a great commander. I won battles through superior numbers, tactical brilliance, and unwavering confidence in the righteousness of my cause. I built a reputation as an officer who never retreated, never surrendered, never admitted defeat. And then I met Admiral Serafina Vale. In 3 minutes, she destroyed everything I thought I knew, not through cruelty or vengeance, but through the simple demonstration of a truth I'd never considered, that real strength isn't the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to choose restraint. That true victory isn't measured in ships destroyed, but in lives preserved. That the greatest commanders aren't those who never lose, but those who learn from loss and become better for it. The threshold system was my last battle, my last defeat, my last lesson. It taught me that decades of victory meant nothing compared to 3 minutes of honest reckoning with my own limitations, my own pride, my own failures. They assumed one human fleet was a bluff. It wasn't. But neither was their mercy. And in the end, mercy proved more powerful than any weapon. Dravik saved the file, closed the manuscript, looked out the window of his study at the peaceful gardens beyond. His wife was there tending to flowers, their grandchildren playing in the afternoon sun, all of it possible because one human admiral had chosen restraint when she could have chosen revenge. He stood and walked outside to join his family in the garden. Behind him on his desk, the manuscript waited. His legacy, his lesson, his final contribution to a galaxy that was perhaps finally learning that strength and mercy weren't opposites. They were partners, and together they might just build something worth protecting.